You can turn to Genesis chapter 4. Genesis 4, and this morning we are going to return to our sermon series on sin. It's been almost 2 months since we finished up the study of anger, but we're back now and ready to move into a new portion of this series. We started this series back in Genesis 1, talking about the very good beginning, when everything was the way God created it to be. When God created everything the way it was supposed to be, this earth was a place for people to flourish. To flourish with joy, to flourish with blessing. And you don't have to look back very far to see this. If you look at the end of Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, God saw all that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And even the end of Genesis chapter 2, verse 25, the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. Nothing was wrong. It was a place for flourishing. It was a situation where everything was the way it was supposed to be. So what's the word we use for that, when everything's the way it's supposed to be? Shalom. Shalom, that's right. But speaking of things not being the way they're supposed to be, the pulpit's falling apart. But sin twists and violates things the way God created them to be. It is anti-shalom. And so we learned that more than anything else, sin is about God. It's what we do when we don't honor God as God, when we exchange God for a replacement that will give us something else that we think we want, when we reject the Creator's teaching, when we reject the image of God in man. And then ultimately we could say that sin is what we do when we don't love God. Sin blinds us. It shatters our relationship with God and with one another. It leads us to shame and to covering. It shatters the way things ought to be. So that was a summary of our first several weeks. And then what we did is, after having seen those themes from the first chapters of Genesis, we asked the question, what are the first sins that God tells us about after Adam and Eve? And the first sin that we came across was anger, as Cain became angry when he didn't get what he wanted, and he ended up murdering his brother. So we spent about 7 weeks talking about anger. So this morning we want to pick up the story again in Genesis chapter 4. After the angry murder, the next recorded sin in the Bible is not a surprise. Genesis 4, let's go back to verse 3. It came about in the course of time that Cain brought an offering to the Lord of the fruit of the ground. Abel, on his part, also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regard for Abel and for his offering, but for Cain and for his offering he had no regard. So Cain became very angry, and his countenance fell. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? And why is your countenance fallen? If you do well, will not your countenance be lifted up? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is for you, but you must master it." Cain told Abel his brother, and it came about when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where is Abel your brother?" And he said, "I don't know." So what's the next sin?
Lying.
Kind of what we would expect, right? Lies tend to tag along right after other sins. So for the next few weeks, we're going to explore this sin of lying. The Bible says God hates a lying tongue. Would be nice to start with a clear definition of a lie. But I don't know how to do that. Maybe a lie is an intentional attempt to mislead someone. But it's always going to be hard to come up with a good definition, because life is complicated and human beings like us are Weasley. There are hard questions about the ethics of lies, such as whether it's ever appropriate. Like if someone's life was on the line to tell a lie. Is there a hierarchy of ethics that would make lying appropriate at some points? There are certain kinds of exaggeration, like hyperbole, that are appropriate as legitimate communication tools. We don't think of them as lies. And then there are all kinds of caveats we could give about lies and lying and telling the truth. For example, telling the truth doesn't mean you always have to say everything you know. And it really doesn't mean that you always have to say everything you think or feel. Wouldn't that be a wreck? So there's a lot of complexity here. And then there are all sorts of variations and complexities to lies themselves. You know, rationalizations are often lies, excuses are often lies, slander is lies, many exaggerations are lies, conveniently omitting certain facts can be a lie, like leaving taxable income off of your tax return, telling carefully selected parts of a story to give a certain impression, misrepresenting yourself on a resume. And then there are all those situations in life that seem to ask you to lie. Like the boss who says, listen, if you're going to take a sick day, you have to tell us you're sick, even if it's not true. That's the way the system works. So then what do you do? Or how many of you have checked that little box online that says you read the terms and conditions? Now, they don't actually care whether you read them or not. The lawyer just wants to know that you have accepted legal responsibility for them. But the truth is, yeah. Is that a lie? Okay, so this is complicated. And what do we tend to do when we get complicated things? Human nature is, let's just make it black and white. Don't complicate things for me. Just make it simple. Make it black and white. Okay, so let's create enough rules to outlaw every possible lie. Good luck with that one. So really, when it comes right down to it, it's not a perfect definition of lying that we need, so much as an understanding of some general principles. And this one, first of all, God created this planet. He created people to flourish here in an environment of truth. So whatever we do that damages that environment of truth is an attack on God, it's an attack on Shalom, it's a lie. And the solution to lying, then, is not ultimately found in rules against it, though laws are necessary, but laws have never changed human hearts. Nor is the solution to lying found in preachers' ability to make people feel badly enough about it that they figure they should stop. The solution to lying is found in, well, if it came from the heart in the first place, then the solution to lying is found in a heart change. A heart changed to love God and love people who are created by God. A heart that then wants to contribute to Shalom instead of tearing it apart. Yeah, so in a later week, we're going to talk about how Jesus and the gospel transform us into truth tellers. But to get us started this morning, I just want us to see that any form of lying is a destructive attack on the way things ought to be here on this planet. God created people to flourish in an environment of truth. Do we live in an environment of truth? Are things the way they ought to be? I like good chicken sandwiches, but they're kind of hard to find. One of the reasons why they seem to be hard to find is because the pictures of chicken sandwiches on menus far exceed the chicken sandwich on your plate when you get it. And it was a Sunday night after church, probably 15 years ago, when we went by Burger King on the way home. And if I've told this story before, I apologize. I've reached that point in ministry where I'm both partly senile and have talked too much to know what I said before. Anyway, we picked up a bunch of sandwiches, and I selected a good-looking new chicken sandwich they had pictured on the menu. You'd think I'd learn, you know. We got home and we sat down to eat. This was at Crystalline's parents' house, and I lifted the top of the bun off of my chicken sandwich, and there was nothing but a slice of cheese. And I thought, that's not what was in the picture, or I wouldn't have ordered it. Now, they live literally 2 minutes from Burger King. So I hopped back in the car, I took my chicken sandwich to Burger King, I walked up to the counter, I opened up my chicken sandwich, I told the manager there's no chicken in my chicken sandwich. And he, without saying a word, he had something, I can't remember, like a knife or something, he peeled back the cheese and there was a little piece of chicken smushed down into the bottom bun under that cheese. And he said to me, smugly, I don't remember the number, okay, but he said something like 3.2 ounces of chicken, just like it's supposed to be. And I was just so floored, I just picked my sandwich up and walked out the door. What do you say next? Do we live in a world where things are the way they ought to be? I will only use one more personal example. What if the ice cream actually had those incredible chunks of cookie dough like the picture shows in the container? What if there actually was some correlation between the size of a potato chip bag and the amount of chips in the bag? What if you didn't have to scour reviews before you made a purchase because you could simply read and believe everything the company says about their product? What if the magazine articles really were as amazing as the titles make them sound? I walked in with Crystalline's latest running magazine from the mailbox, and I said to her, Crystalline, it has finally arrived. The issue that tells you how to be unstoppable. They finally figured it out, and this issue will tell you. What if every listing on eBay and Craigslist was completely accurate? What if when people testified in court, they spoke the truth, and if nobody ever went to court because of a false accusation? We're headed here toward a Super Bowl. Some of you are very aware of that, and some of you just learned right now. Sorry. It's Pastor 8's fault. And there is this unfortunate scenario with the Super Bowl where it could be the last game of a player who's one of the greatest to ever play the game. And yet there's been this recent tainting with this accusation of performance-enhancing drugs, which he denies, but we've learned from Lance Armstrong and all kinds of other situations that when an athlete denies taking performance-enhancing drugs, it means nothing. And yet at the same time, we have no way to verify whether the charge is true or not. So here you have the end of one of the greatest careers in the NFL, probably climaxing in the Super Bowl, and there's this huge cloud of suspicion, but somewhere along the line, some people know what's true, but the other several hundred million of us who care have absolutely no way to know what's true. Is that the way things were supposed to be? What if when politicians campaigned for office, there was an assumption that you could count on the promises they made? What if every panhandler was a person who genuinely has a desperate need for money today to feed their children? Wouldn't that help the people who have a desperate need for money today to feed their children? What if a woman was as beautiful on the inside as her clothes and jewelry and makeup portray on the outside? What if, no matter what church you walked into, you could be sure that you were going to hear nothing but the truth there? What if you could take seriously phrases like, I was just kidding, this'll take just a second. I'll be right there. I don't remember. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. Or I'm praying for you. What if you could always trust the words, I promise, or I love you? What if you lived in a world where you could be sure you were always being told the truth? Or to ask it another way, how much have lies destroyed Shalom? Funny thing, lies are culturally assumed to be one of the least serious bad things you can do. Many people would still say that lying is generally wrong, but they'd be quick to say that it's not all that bad either. They might say, oh, the government has plenty of money without squeezing extra tax dollars out of me, and that tax isn't even fair anyways. Or, it's not really a lie because everybody in our industry does it, it's just the way our industry works. Or, yeah, I lied, but I didn't hurt anybody. And the perception is that lies aren't even close to being in the same category as something like murder. But how much have lies destroyed Shalom? Do you enjoy living in an environment in which it's hard to trust anyone or anything? Is that an environment in which people and relationships can flourish? How many people in the world are in some type of close relationship, like a marriage, in which they cannot trust the other person? What's that like? How many lives have been destroyed by lies? How much damage do they really do? How much do you care if someone makes promises to you and then breaks them? Promises love to you and then acts to hurt you. Is that just a little thing? So even though people wouldn't put lies together in the same category as something like murder, there is a reason why in Revelation 22 God says that outside of heaven are the murderers and everyone who loves and practices lying. And why in Revelation 21 God says that murderers and all liars will have their part in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. So there's something going on here that is much more serious than we want to think. I want us to do something pretty simple with the rest of our time this morning. I want us to observe what the book of Genesis records for us about the lies that permeated mankind and the damage that they did. The book of Genesis records quite a few more examples of lies than any other book in the Bible. And so it's a valuable and simple way for us to begin this study. So we'll just work our way through Genesis and try to observe and get a feel for how lies destroy shalom. So first of all, we have Genesis 4:9, where we read that Cain lied to God. Now what was that? Was it guilt? Was it shame? Was it fear? Whatever it wasn't something to be taken lightly, for this was a murder he was covering up. And we see there that lies usually follow other sins. We sin, then we lie about it. But we can't really say that Cain's lie was the first lie, because it was another lie that first tempted Adam and Eve to shatter shalom. Genesis 3, verse 4, the serpent said to the woman, "You surely will not die. For God knows that in the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." A couple things to observe there. First of all, Jesus said that Satan is by his nature a liar and the father of lies. John 8:44. He's the great enemy of shalom, who knows that truth is essential to shalom, and so he chooses his poison carefully. He knows that you can poison things the way they ought to be with lies. So he is the father of lies. A second lesson we see here in Genesis 3, and maybe part of the reason why Satan is the father of lies, is that sin always grows in soil that has been fertilized with lies. The problem in Genesis 3 isn't just that the serpent is lying, it's that there are people believing his lies. And we don't just tell lies, though that's the first thing we think of when we think of lying, right? We think of our problem with telling lies. But there's just as much of a problem we have with believing them. And that's why there are Christian books with titles like Lies Women Believe, and Lies Young Women Believe, and Lies Men Believe, and Lies Couple Believe. And that's appropriate. Those are needed because sin lies to us about what's good and right and satisfying, and we only sin after we've believed some lies first. Sin doesn't grow in an atmosphere of truth. It grows when the soil has been fertilized with lies. So in the Garden of Eden, the father of lies was lying, and Adam and Eve were believing lies. And the curse that the world lives under today can be traced back to those things. Now, when Adam and Eve believed the lies of the father of lies, it was kind of like they were brought into his family. Now, that's kind of a hard thing for us to stomach. None of us want to be called, child of the devil. Yet that's how Jesus describes it. And he said in John 8, you want to do the desires of your father. You're a liar like your father. You lie like your father. And so we can expect that having believed his lies, we would begin to see Adam and Eve and their family begin to be liars. And we might even see the beginning of that in Genesis 3:11. God said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat?" And Adam said, verse 12, "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me from the tree, and I ate." That's a great example of how slippery we are, because those words are true. You can say true words and lie. And it happens all the time. And it's so nasty and so deceptive and so deadly, it's satanic, Jesus wants you to know. The ability to take some truth and say it in a way that misleads. It's a terrible thing, and it happens all the time among us. And I've done it myself many times, and it shatters the way things ought to be. Because it not only tells a falsehood, but it abuses truth. And that's what Adam does here. Because when he speaks these words of truth, what does he mean by them? He means, God, it's your fault that this happened, not my fault. That's probably what he means. I don't know that for sure. But so he says true words, and someone could say, Adam, you're lying. And he could say, no, I'm not. Everything I said was true. Yeah, but you were intending to misrepresent what is true. So Cain wasn't the first liar. Lying spread from the serpent to Adam and Eve, and then to Cain. Did it continue to spread? Well, we move ahead past Genesis 4, past Genesis 7 in the flood, up to Genesis 12, where we meet Abraham. And by this point, we've had two fresh starts. One fresh start with Noah, and now another sort of fresh start with Abraham. And I suppose, in theory, you might wonder if they learned their lesson. You know, maybe Noah and his family got off the ark after the flood and said, you know what? Let's not keep going with that lying thing. That was a bad idea. Or maybe Abraham sees an opportunity for a fresh start. Well, Genesis 12, verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land, so Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. It came about when he came near to Egypt that he said to Sarah his wife, see now, I know that you're a beautiful woman, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife, and they'll kill me, but they'll let you live. Please say that you're my sister, so that it may go well with me because of you, and that I may live on account of you. It came about when Abram came into Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. Pharaoh's officials saw her and praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Therefore he treated Abram well for her sake, and gave him sheep and oxen and donkeys and male and female servants and female donkeys and camels. But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Then Pharaoh called Abraham and said, what is this you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here's your wife. Take her and go. Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they escorted him away with his wife and all that belonged to him. Wow. What motivated his lie? It's easy, right? It was fear. It was fear. And it started with a legitimate desire, the desire to stay alive. Lies often come from legitimate desires. And I think we're going to see that fear is the foundational motive behind most lies. There are others, but it is the most foundational one. We start with often legitimate desires, but then we fear that something is going to frustrate, complicate, take away our desires. And so, at that pivotal moment, when that fear is supposed to be taken right to God, to trust the one who can control things, we instead grasp for some control. That's what lying is. It is control. It is taking a hold of the situation and determining, I will control this myself, lest I lose what I fear I might lose. When we fear and we should trust God's control, we turn to the sense of control that lies give us instead. But that control is always damaging, and Abraham endangered his wife through his lie, and how much damage God prevented here by his grace, I'm not sure, but he put his wife in a terrible situation through his lie. Continue on to Genesis 18. Genesis 18, verse 9. Yahweh came to Abraham. The Lord came to Abraham apparently 3 angels, one of them, though, the Lord himself. Verse 9, they said to Abram, "Where is Sarah your wife?" And he said, "There in the tent." And he said, "I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, Sarah your wife will have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. Sarah was past childbearing. Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have become old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also?" And the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh, saying, 'Shall I indeed bear a child when I am so old?' Is anything too difficult for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you at this time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah denied it, however, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. And he said, "No, but you did laugh." Where did Sarah learn to lie? Well, nobody had to teach her. It was her sinful nature. But it didn't help that she had a lying husband. Her husband lied out of fear. In verse 15, it says that Sarah lied out of fear. So there it is again. If I struggle to tell the truth, I can be quite certain that I also struggle to trust God with my desires and my fears. If I struggle to tell the truth, I can be quite certain that I also struggle to trust God with my desires and my fears. Go ahead, 2 chapters, Genesis 20. Verse 1, "Now Abraham journeyed from there toward the land of the Negev and settled between Kadesh and Shur. Then he sojourned in Gerar. Abraham said of Sarah his wife, 'She's my sister.' So Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream of the night and said to him, 'Behold, you're a dead man because of the woman who you've taken, for she is married.'" Look at verse 10. "And Abimelech said to Abraham, 'What have you encountered that you've done this thing?' Abraham said, 'Because I thought, surely there's no fear of God in this place, and they'll kill me because of my wife.'" Surely there's no fear of God in this place. You know what that means? My God's power doesn't reach this far. I'm going to have to be God here in this situation. And look at verse 12. "Besides, she actually is my sister, the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife." Oh. So there's that insidious ability we have to rationalize our lies by mixing them with a bunch of truth. That's what Satan did to Eve. Take a bunch of truth and twist it around. So very few lies are entirely false. I mean, there are all the "I didn't do it" lies when you did. Those are entirely false, I know. But the most common lies that circulate and destroy so much have some measure of truth in them. They distort what is true. You see that this happened in Gerar. That's what it said at the end of verse 1, right? So if you go over to Genesis 26, then, Genesis 26, and we come to Abraham's son Isaac. Genesis 26, verse 6, Isaac lived in Gerar. Verse 7, when the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, "She's my sister." For he was afraid to say, "My wife," thinking the men of the place might kill me on account of Rebekah, for she's beautiful. Apparently these men married well in terms of outward beauty. But Isaac shares his father's fears. Parents, I think it's very likely that what you inordinately fear and struggle to trust God with, your children will learn to fear. And they will probably struggle to trust God with it too. And again, how is Isaac unable to see the danger that his lie is causing for his wife? Even the Philistine king can see it. See verse 10? Abimelech said, "What is this you have done to us? One of the people might easily have lain with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." Even he can see the danger, but sin blinds and lies blind. So that's Isaac, Abraham's son. And then one day Isaac was old and his son lied to him. Genesis 27, verse 18. Jacob came to his father Isaac, and he said, "My father." And he said, "Here am I. Who are you, my son?" Verse 19. Jacob said to his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn." Oh, Jacob said, "I am Esau? I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you told me. Get up, please, sit and eat of my game, that you may bless me." Isaac said to his son, How is it that you have it so quickly, my son?" And he said, "Because the Lord your God caused it to happen to me." Now, if you want to see a good example of what it really means to take the name of the Lord in vain, that's it. Not the kind of curse words and things that most people think of. That's taking the Lord's name in vain. Using nice, religious-sounding language to get what you want. Abusing God and truth to get what you want. The Lord your God caused it to happen to me. Well, Jacob, if God is able to cause that deer to come to you right when you need it, he was able to make sure you got the blessing you needed in the first place. Right? You see the inconsistency there? How'd this happen, Jacob? Oh, God's so powerful. Well, you're lying because you think God's not powerful enough. Do you see that? Isaac, verse 21, Isaac said to Jacob, "Please come close, that I may feel you, my son, whether you are really my son Esau or not." So Jacob came close to Isaac his father. He felt him and said, "The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau." He did not recognize him because his hands were hairy like his brother Esau's hands, so he blessed him. And he said, "Are you really my son Esau?" And he said, "I am." It's important to observe also in this particular situation that Jacob was told to do this by his mom. It was mom's fears that were really behind this. See back in chapter 27, verse 12. No, not verse 12. Back in 27, verse 5, Rebekah was listening, and verse 6, Rebekah said to Jacob, "Behold, I heard your father speaking to your brother, saying, 'Bring me some game and prepare a savory dish for me that I may eat and bless you in the presence of the Lord before my death. Now, therefore, my son, listen to me as I command you. Go now to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats.'" And so this was her scheme. And Jacob tried to argue with her. Verse 11, Jacob answered his mother Rebekah, "Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. Perhaps my father will feel me, then I will be a deceiver in his sight, and I will bring upon myself a curse and not a blessing." But his mother said to him, "Your curse be on me, my son. Only obey my voice and go get them for me. Do what I told you to do. I'm mom." And so it was mom's fears. Now Jacob was wrong. I mean, he lied. He did what was wrong. But it was mom's fears driving it. So Jacob not only lied, he also learned to lie. Jacob became characterized as a deceiver. Do you see what we have now? Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob. Sin crosses the generations. Now Jacob's lie had such severe consequences that he had to leave his homeland. He went to work for his uncle Laban, and we pick up the story in Genesis 29, verse 15. Genesis 29:15. Then Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be?" Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful of form and face. Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." Laban said, "It's better that I give her to you than to give her to another man. Stay with me." And so Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my time is completed, that I may go into her." Laban gathered all the men of the place and made a feast. Now in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him, and Jacob went into her. Laban also gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? Why then have you deceived me?" But Laban said, "It's not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the firstborn." How about that? What did I do wrong? That's the way we do things around here. You see how damaging lies are? How twisted this is? How weaselly human beings are? We can pull off things like that. Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Jacob, Laban. Genesis 31, verse 20. And Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him that he was fleeing. So you can lie by being quiet. And so now Laban's deceiving Jacob and Jacob's deceiving Laban. You know, and that makes me think that when people say, my lies aren't hurting anybody, oftentimes what they're saying is, people don't even know. You know, I lied and nobody even knew. Well, okay. But at the same time, do you realize there are probably a bunch of things you don't know too? A bunch of people who've lied to you and you've just never found it out. And they say, I didn't hurt anybody, but if you found out, you'd be really mad. So we get in this pretend world where we think we're the only ones getting away with lies, not realizing how many times other people may have gotten away with lies to us. That's why I wanted us to read Jeremiah 5 when Jeremiah says, watch out, be on guard. Everybody's lying to everybody. That's what it's like when lies shatter shalom. And then Genesis 31, verse 34. Now Rachel had stolen the household idols, and she had taken them and put them in the camel's saddle to hide them from Laban, and she sat on them. And Laban felt through all the tent, but did not find them. She said to her father, let not my lord be angry that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is upon me. So he searched, but did not find the household idols. So there she had them hidden in the seat of the camel, but she couldn't get up. So unfortunately, he wasn't able to look there. Now, we're not told whether she was telling the truth or not about whether she couldn't get up. But regardless, do you see who we've added now? Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, Laban, Jacob, Rachel. We have a family problem. We have a humanity family problem. But we have a family problem. And it's spreading to the kids, and it's spreading to the kids-in-laws. All of these people are relatives, all living a life of lies, all driven by fear, all trying to get what they want. Now there's one last sad lie in Genesis. One last damaging lie. It's over in Genesis 39. Well, wait, we skipped one. We skipped the day when Jacob was the old man. He deceived his elderly father once, but then he became elderly himself. And some of his sons sold another one of his sons into slavery, and then we read this, Genesis 37, verse 31. So his brothers took Joseph's tunic and slaughtered a male goat and dipped the tunic in the blood, and they sent the varicolored tunic and brought it to their father and said, we found this. Please examine it to see whether it's your son's tunic or not. Then he examined it and said, it is my son's tunic. A wild beast has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces. So Jacob tore his clothes and put sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. And verse 35 says, he refused to be comforted. How would you like that, parents? But remember, Jacob was a deceiver. and his wife was a deceiver. And now they're children. All right. There's one last sad lie in Genesis, which I said before. When an Egyptian official's wife lied about Joseph, Genesis 39, verse 17, she spoke to her husband with these words, "The Hebrew slave whom you brought to us came in to me to make sport of me, and as I raised my voice and screamed, he left his garment beside me and fled outside. So when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spoke to him, saying, 'This is what your slave did to me,' his anger burned. So Joseph's master took him and put him into the jail." So that's a sad lie. That's a damaging lie. But there's a glimmer of hope there, because it's not somebody in Abraham's family who lied. It's somebody else. Joseph's actually a truth teller. And that's really encouraging, because that tells us that even though sin tends to spread across the generations in families, God's bigger than that. Grace is bigger than that. Joseph is a glimmer of hope. He is a glimmer of grace, of God at work. And the good news is that God has plans for all these liars. Plans for this lying family. Plans for us. Someday, through that lying family, through Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah and Jacob and Rachel, someday Jesus is going to come. Through that family. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And he would be lied about in terrible ways, but live a life of truth. He would be condemned at a trial of deception and lies, and he would die because he loves liars. He would take the punishment for our lies, and he would rise again, and by his power begin to create a new people of God, greater than the family of Abraham, because he would create this new people of God by changing them from the inside out, by making them actually new creations in Christ and giving them a heart of truth. That's what a child of Abraham would do someday. So, you see their hope. And we'll come back to that next week. So as we finish up this morning, I wonder what you would tell someone if they asked you what the sermon was about this morning. What did Pastor preach on this morning? Well, he preached about lying. What did he say about it? He said he was against it. All right. Well, that's true. I'm against it. But I think it would be better if we said that what we learned this morning is that this is not the way God's world is supposed to be. God made people to flourish in a world of truth, not the world of lies that we live in. And every time we tell a lie, we're doing damage to the way things ought to be. And in so doing, we're really attacking God who created humanity to flourish. You see that? So let's start with that big perspective, that big creation perspective on lying. And then the next couple of weeks, we'll dig down into some more of the details about what the Bible tells us and how the gospel creates truth tellers.